This year, buying an iPhone was a rather tough decision for myself. Being primarily an iPhone mini user, I was completely distraught on which iPhone to buy this year. For the longest time, we all knew that Apple was going to discontinue the iPhone mini lineup. But I think I was sort of in denial. Ultimately, like everything else in life, it took some time for reality to set in. And I had to come to terms with the fact that there would not be an iPhone 14 mini. It got to a point where I had to make a decision on which iPhone I would be picking up this year. What's the iPhone I want to replace an already irreplaceable phone? If I'm being completely honest, if I wasn't running a tech channel, I'd be completely fine with holding on to my mini for another 2+ years. But the ultimate goal, of course, is to grow this channel, and nothing helps fuel growth more than a brand new Apple product. So I decided to do what any other logical person would do in my position. I opted to go the complete opposite route this year and pick up an iPhone 14 Pro Max, which I'm not entirely sure was the right decision as of yet. How's it going, everyone? My name is RJ, and in this video, we'll be discussing my honest thoughts on the newly released iPhone 14 Pro Max from the perspective of an ex-iPhone 13 mini user. Oh man, that really hurts for me to say. Here in Canada this year, surprisingly, we didn't see a price hike, like some of my friends over in European countries did. Nonetheless, I still ended up paying 1,750 Canadian dollars for a 128GB version of the 14 Pro Max. That is not cheap, my friends. Of course, if you guys want to see more content on the iPhone 14 Pro Max, including a day in the life video with this phone and of course my full review, then make sure you do subscribe to the channel. And while you're at it, make sure you drop a like on this video so it does help push my video to a wider audience. That would be much appreciated. Starting off with the design. This year, much like the iPhone 13 Pro, the iPhone 14 Pro Max resembles its predecessor, with the exception of one major overhaul. The notch is no longer a part of the iPhone 14 Pro lineup, and it's being replaced with what Apple is calling the Dynamic Island. Now, I don't know about you guys, but to me that sounds like a really bad Netflix show. Nonetheless, the implementation of the Dynamic Island is ingenious. We'll talk more about the Dynamic Island in just a little bit. But first, I want to talk about how the iPhone Pro Max feels in the hands. In the hands, the iPhone 14 Pro Max is a heavy phone, coming in at 240 grams, which is about 100 grams heavier than the iPhone 13 mini. So if you're like me and you're coming to the iPhone 14 Pro from an iPhone 13 mini, you're definitely going to feel that extra additional bulk and weight. The iPhone 14 Pro Max is rocking a 6.7-inch Super Retina XDR OLED display with a resolution of 1290 by 2796 pixels for a pixel density of 460. Coming from an iPhone 13 mini, this is a massive upgrade in the screen department. The display is vivid, it's vibrant, and more importantly, it's very bright, getting up to a max peak brightness of 2000 nits, making this the brightest display currently on any smartphone, which I feel like is definitely a change that we could all appreciate. I know we've all been in a situation on bright sunny days where we all wish the display visibility was a little bit better. Well, now on the 14 Pro Max, it's a whole lot better, there's no question about it. Now, this is a big display, and reaching the top of the display for me is no easy task. Unless you have hands the size of Kawhi Leonard, for the most part of your day, you are going to be using this phone with two hands. On one hand, no pun intended, a display this size in your pockets is really nice to have. On the other hand, I'm someone who lives a very go lifestyle. I'm always on my feet and on the go. And while I'm on the go, I don't want to be bothered to use both hands just to send a quick text message or a quick reply to an email. With the mini, I could easily handle the phone one-handed for most of my tasks, which to me was invaluable in most situations. Getting used to carrying around a massive 6.7-inch smartphone that weighs about 240 grams is something I'm definitely going to have to adapt to, especially considering this is my first ever Pro Max iPhone. This year, something that's only available with the 14 Pro lineup is an always-on display. A feature that's been on Android ever since 2008 is finally available on the iPhone. With an always-on display, your display is dimmed to a very low level of brightness. Apple's take on an always-on display isn't implemented the same way as it is on an Android. So on an iPhone, lowering the level of brightness is what Apple decided to go with. What's really cool though is, if you do wear an Apple Watch and you leave your phone behind in a room, the always-on display will automatically dim and turn off. It'll even recognize if the phone is in your pockets and turn off the always-on display to preserve battery life. I do have two concerns though. One being, how will this impact my overall battery life? And secondly, with this sort of implementation, does it lead to screen burn-in over time? Two things I'll definitely be on the lookout in my long-term review. And if you're as curious as I am, then make sure to subscribe to the channel and of course turn on that bell notification icon. As I mentioned earlier, a big change to the Pro lineup this year is the Dynamic Island. The functionality and the implementation of Dynamic Island is incredible. However, there is a slight issue. I consume a lot of content on my smartphone. And I just feel like when I'm consuming content on this phone, having this cutout on my phone is more intrusive than what I'm used to experiencing with the notch. A slight portion of the content I'm watching is showcased around the dynamic island, which to me doesn't look right. This could be something I'm still gonna have to get used to because I've only had this phone for about a day or so. But what I do appreciate is this year the bezels are slightly thinner. The Pro Max sports a screen to body ratio of 88.3%, which is about 1% higher than what we had on the 13 Pro Max. Despite the jokes and the terrible naming strategy, Dynamic Island is very well implemented. No one saw this coming. We all knew that the notch was going away this year, and it was going to be replaced with this. But we had no idea that Apple was going to use this cutout for an actual interactive functional purpose. This portion of your iPhone right here doubles down as essentially a hub for alerts, notifications, and app shortcuts, which does change in appearance depending on the function. It's my favorite implementation of the notch on any phone yet. However, there is an issue with reachability, especially on the Pro Max model. I tweeted this out as a joke a couple of days ago on my Twitter. I wrote that now that I think about it, I'll probably never reach Dynamic Island on my iPhone 14 Pro Max. And you know what? Now that I had the iPhone 14 Pro Max in my hands, I couldn't have been more right. Reaching the top of the display to interact with the island isn't easy, especially when using one hand. But if you do have large hands like Kawhi Leonard, of course, then you should have no issues whatsoever. Of course, a counter argument to that would be, RJ, why didn't you just go with the regular iPhone 14 Pro? And you make a valid point. But what I've come to realize is with an iPhone in general, the battery life on these phones start off really strong. I personally was averaging close to 9 hours of screen on time on my iPhone 13 Pro Max. But after about 6 months or so, even with my battery health being over 95%, my screen on times plummeted. And I mean plummeted all the way down to about 5 hours per day. I've talked to many other iPhone 13 Pro owners across Twitter, and they've pretty much experienced this drastic drop off in battery as well. So this year I decided if I wasn't going to own an iPhone mini anymore, then I was going to go with the battery king, the iPhone 14 Pro Max. People have told me the 13 Pro Max was the battery king last year, easily a 2-day battery phone. So with the iPhone 14 Pro Max, I'm hoping to experience about the same. If that means I'll never be able to reach Dynamic Island, then so be it. Something we do need to talk about though, if you're in the US and you bought an iPhone 14, regardless of the model, you'll only be able to pick up the eSIM version of the iPhone. This to me is a bit problematic. Let's say as an example, you're traveling to a foreign nation, and in that country, they don't support your carrier AT&T. This means you will have to pay roaming charges if you do want to take your iPhone 14 with you to that country. This is especially problematic for a content creator such as myself. I switch phones about every month or so to review and test out for you guys. And switching phones using a SIM card is much more convenient than calling a carrier every 2 weeks. Luckily for myself, the Canadian version of the iPhone 14 still supports a SIM card slot. But I know the day is coming where the iPhone will strictly be only eSIM. These are just my thoughts on the eSIM situation. I could be entirely wrong with my take. If you do feel differently, then let me know down in the comments below. This year, none of the iPhone 14 Pro colors really resonated with me. I was hoping Apple would bring back the Sierra Blue, but no luck. So I opted to go with this base black version this year, and I feel like I fell for Apple marketing. In person, this phone looks completely different from what I've seen online. I thought we were finally getting a proper matte black iPhone this year, but instead what we got is a very similar shade of gray to last year's model. It might be a little bit darker, but that's about it. This year, the camera lenses are noticeably bigger. The camera bump is more pronounced and protruded outwards. However, all of these changes were necessary due to the fact that this phone now comes with a 48 megapixel main lens. So Apple is finally moving away with the 12 megapixel sensor they've been using all this time. And these improved cameras have got me the most excited. I've only had a little over 24 hours with the 14 Pro Max, but so far the pictures from the main lens have been pretty impressive. You may not notice the differences right away because by default the stock camera is set to 12 megapixels. You do need to go into settings and change the camera settings to raw photos in order to enable 48 megapixels. The images coming out of the main lens have most certainly improved when shooting in RAW. The saturation, the color detail, and the way that the phone handles the highlights have all improved. However, it does seem like Apple hasn't improved the HDR at all. It still has the exact same flaws as last year's 13 Pro Max. In low lighting conditions is where you see the 48 megapixel sensor putting in work. I've noticed a drastic improvement in low light shots. Thanks to the larger sensor, these images in low light look incredible. I still have a lot more testing to do on the camera front. I did also have a chance to test out the video quality, and this has got me excited. I shoot a good portion of my videos for social such as Instagram and TikTok on an iPhone, and the video quality this year I feel has gone up a notch. The iPhone 13 Pro was already the king of video, and this year for Apple to give us that larger 48 megapixel sensor is going to make a world of difference. There are also new modes this year I haven't had a chance to check out, like action mode, and cinematic mode is now available in 4K, which should be pretty interesting. As an ex-iPhone mini user, adapting to the 14 Pro Max as my daily driver should be really interesting. I'll keep you guys updated over on Twitter at RJTech. Make sure to subscribe for a lot more iPhone content. And if you did make it till the end of this video, drop a dolphin emoji down in the comments below so I know exactly who my true supporters are. As always, thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to flex with your dynamic island tech. That is if you ever do make it there, of course.